Up in the big, wide, wonderful sky, where the sun plays peekaboo and the moon tells sleepy stories, lived a little cloud named Raindrop. He wasn't like the other clouds, the big, important ones. The cumulus clouds were like giant scoops of vanilla ice cream, proud and puffy as they drifted lazily along. The nimbus clouds were dark and serious, carrying the heavy weight of thunderstorms and booming with important, rumbling voices. They were the grown-ups of the sky, full of purpose and direction, always heading somewhere with a very specific job to do, their gray forms commanding respect from all who looked up from below. Raindrop, however, was as small as a forgotten wisp of cotton candy. He was a tiny puff of white, so light that the wind often forgot he was there, pushing him around like a lost feather. The bigger clouds would sail past him, their shadows stretching for kilometers across the green earth below, while Raindrop's shadow was barely the size of a daisy. He would watch them with wide, watery eyes, seeing them gather for important meetings, planning where the next big rain would fall, or which mountaintop needed a soft blanket of fog. He felt like a comma in a long, beautiful poem, a tiny pause that nobody really noticed. He tried his best to look bigger, puffing out his little chest and holding his breath until he was almost transparent. But it never worked for long. A gentle breeze would come along and tickle him, and he would let out a little giggle of vapor, shrinking back to his usual, tiny self. The other clouds didn't mean to be unkind, but they were just too busy with their grand sky duties to pay much mind to a speck like him. "Oh, look!" a big stratus might murmur to another, its little Raindrop still dreaming. He wanted so desperately to be part of their world, to feel the pull of a storm and the satisfaction of a job well done. So Raindrop would spend his days floating near the edge of the great blue expanse, a lonely spectator to the magnificent theater of the atmosphere. He watched the sun paint the other clouds in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple at dawn and dusk, while he often remained just a simple, pale white. He saw them chase each other in playful games of tag across the horizon, their laughter echoing like soft thunder. He longed to join in, to be more than just a tiny floating thought in a sky full of grand ideas and powerful weather, wishing he could be a part of their important, world-changing work. Deep inside his small, fluffy form, Raindrop held a secret, a dream so big it felt like it might burst right out of him. He didn't just want to be bigger, he wanted to make a difference. He would gaze down at the world below, at the tiny houses and winding rivers, at the sprawling green forests and the colorful patchwork of farmers' fields. He saw the children playing in the parks and the little flowers reaching for the sun. He felt a connection to it all, a deep and powerful love for the earth that he floated above. He imagined his own raindrops falling gently, making a flower stand a little taller. This dream was his constant companion, his most treasured possession. While the other clouds talked of powerful gales and mighty downpours, Raindrop dreamt of a single perfect drop of water landing on a thirsty ladybug's back. He dreamt of making one wilting daisy lift its head again, or filling a tiny bird bath so the sparrows could have a splash. His dreams weren't about power or being noticed. They were about helping in his own small, quiet way. He believed, with all his little cloudy heart, that even the smallest act of kindness could send ripples of happiness out into the world, a belief he held on to tightly. He would practice making rain, squeezing with all his might to produce a single tiny droplet. Plink. It would fall for what seemed like an eternity, a shimmering jewel tumbling through the air, only to evaporate long before it ever reached the ground. The other small clouds would sometimes laugh. "You're trying to water the sky, Raindrop," they would tease. But Raindrop didn't mind. He knew that practice was important, and every little evaporated drop was a lesson learned. He was determined to get stronger, to make his dream a reality, no matter how many times he had to try. Every night, when the stars blinked on one by one, Raindrop would tell his dream to the moon. The moon, wise and kind, would listen patiently, its gentle light wrapping around Raindrop like a comforting hug. "A dream is never too small, little one," the moon would seem to whisper back, its silvery glow a silent promise. It is the wanting, the trying, that gives it its power. And so, comforted by the moon's silent encouragement, Raindrop would drift off to sleep, his dreams filled with the sweet scent of damp earth and the happy faces of grateful flowers, ready for another day of trying. The days grew long and hot. The sun, once a playful friend, now beat down with a relentless, fiery glare. Down below, the world began to change. The once lush green fields turned a dusty shade of brown, and the vibrant flowers in the meadows drooped their heads in sorrow. The earth itself looked tired and thirsty, with little cracks appearing in the soil like a sad, wrinkled frown. The big, important clouds seemed to be on vacation, having drifted far away over the distant ocean, leaving the land to bake under the endless blue sky. The air grew still and heavy with a silent plea for rain. Raindrop saw the sadness below and his heart ached. He saw a little rabbit digging in the hard, dry dirt, searching for a juicy root that was no longer there. He saw a farmer standing by his fence, his shoulders slumped as he looked at his wilting corn. Raindrop knew he couldn't make a thunderstorm or a great soaking downpour like the mighty nimbus clouds, but he had to do something. He remembered the moon's words and decided his small dream was needed now more than ever. He floated over to a patch of thirsty-looking daisies, their yellow centers facing the ground in defeat. With all the focus a little cloud could muster, he squeezed and squeezed. He thought of the thirsty rabbit, the sad farmer, and the wilting daisies. He poured all of his hope into the effort. Finally, a single perfect droplet formed, then another and another. It wasn't a shower or even a sprinkle. It was more like a gentle mist, a tiny offering. The droplets fell, and this time, they made it. They landed on the petals of one daisy, then another, washing away the dust and giving them a tiny, cool drink. It was a small victory, but it felt as grand as a hurricane. Slowly, the daisies began to respond. One lifted its head, then another, turning their faces ever so slightly towards Raindrop, as if to say thank you. Raindrop felt a thrill of joy so pure it made him shimmer. He hadn't saved the whole field, not even close, but he had helped. He had made a small difference. He spent the rest of the day drifting from one small, sad plant to another, offering his tiny, misty gift. It was exhausting work for such a little cloud, but with every revived flower, his own spirit felt stronger and his purpose clearer. One afternoon, a strange and, frightening smell drifted up into the sky. It was sharp and smoky, and it made the air sting. I looked down and saw something terrible. In the heart of the great green forest, a plume of gray smoke was rising, twisting into the sky like an angry snake. At its base, an angry orange glow flickered and danced, greedily eating the dry leaves and trees. A fire! The animals of the forest were running in panic, their small forms scattering in every direction as the flames grew bigger and bolder, their crackling roar a terrifying sound that reached even the highest parts of the sky. The fire spread with alarming speed, helped by a hot, cruel wind that seemed to delight in the chaos. The beautiful green canopy that I had always admired was being swallowed by a monster of orange and black. The smoke billowed higher and higher, so thick and dark that it began to block out the sun, casting a gloomy, fearful shadow over the land. I felt a cold knot of fear in my fluffy center. This was a problem far too big for any one cloud, let alone a tiny wisp like me. The big clouds were still far away, and the land was in desperate, immediate danger. I watched in horror as the flames licked at the trunks of the oldest, tallest trees that had stood for hundreds of years. I saw a family of deer trapped on a ridge, their eyes wide with terror as the fire closed in around them. My own smallness felt overwhelming. What could my tiny, misty drops do against such a raging inferno? My dream of helping suddenly felt foolish and, well, naive. I was just one little cloud. I couldn't possibly stop this disaster. Despair began to wash over me, as dark and choking as the smoke rising from the forest below. But then, I thought of the little daisy I had helped. I remembered the feeling of its petals reviving under my gentle mist. I remembered the farmer's sad face and the thirsty rabbit. My dream wasn't about being big or powerful. It was about helping, no matter what. Even if I couldn't put out the whole fire, maybe I could save one tree. Maybe I could protect one small corner of the forest, one little patch of ferns where a frightened mouse was hiding. I had to try. A new kind of courage, born from my deep love for the world below, began to fill me up. With my new resolve, I looked around. I wasn't entirely alone. Scattered across the vast blue sky were other small clouds, wisps and puffs just like me, all watching the fire with the same look of fear and helplessness. They were the forgotten ones, the little clouds who, well, like me, were usually overlooked. An idea sparked in my mind, a brilliant and daring idea. Alone I was just a mist, but together we might be something more. I zipped across the sky, a tiny streak of white against the smoky haze, my voice calling out to them. "Little clouds! We have to help!" I shouted, my voice surprisingly strong. "We can't just watch. I know we are small, but if we work together, we can make a difference." At first, the other clouds hesitated. They were scared. "But we're too little," one whispered. "The fire is too big," cried another. They had always been told they were insignificant, and it was a hard belief to shake. They watched the terrifying blaze below, their courage faltering before it even had a chance to grow, their lifelong feelings of inadequacy holding them back from action. It seemed like an impossible task. "I helped a flower today," I said, my voice full of passion. "Just me." It was a small thing, but it mattered to that flower. Think what we could do if we all tried. Think of the animals. Think of the trees. Our smallness is not a weakness if we stand together. Our little drops can become a shower. My words, full of hope and determination, hung in the smoky air. I looked at each of them, my gaze steady and pleading. Slowly, one little cloud drifted closer, then another and another. They saw the fire in my spirit, and it ignited a spark of hope in their own. Soon, a small cluster of little clouds had gathered around me, a small but determined army against the darkening sky. There were dozens of us, then 100. We were a motley crew of puffs and wisps, a collection of forgotten specks who had suddenly found a shared purpose. We looked at each other, no longer feeling small or alone, but part of something important. Led by me, we huddled together, our small forms merging into one another, getting ready for the biggest task of our lives. We were ready to show the world what little clouds could do. Huddled together, the little clouds became one. We weren't a big dark nimbus cloud, but we were something new, a united gray blanket of hope and determination. I, right at the center of the group, felt the energy of all the other clouds flowing into me. I felt their courage and their shared dream. "Now," I called out, "think of the forest. Squeeze with all your might." And together, as one body and one heart, we squeezed. We pushed and strained, pouring all of our collective will into the great effort of making rain, focusing all our energy on the thirsty, burning world below. At first, it was just a few drops, like the ones I had made earlier. Plink, plank, plonk. They sizzled as they hit the hot ground and turned to steam on the edges of the fire. For a moment, it seemed like it wasn't enough. The fire monster roared, mocking our feeble attempt. But the little clouds didn't give up. Encouraged by my unwavering resolve, they squeezed harder, our combined strength growing with every passing second. The few drops became a sprinkle, then a light patter, and then, miraculously, a steady, determined shower began to fall from the sky. The rain fell directly over the heart of the fire. It hissed and steamed as it met the angry flames, a symphony of 1,000 tiny droplets working together. The sound was beautiful, a gentle drumming that promised relief and renewal. The thick, choking smoke began to thin as the rain washed the ash from the air. The terrified animals, huddled in their hiding places, felt the cool drops on their fur and looked up with newfound hope. The rain may not have had the booming thunder of a great storm, but it had a quiet strength, a persistence that the fire could not ignore. Slowly, incredibly, the tide began to turn. The angry orange glow of the fire began to shrink. The flames that had been leaping high into the air now sputtered and hissed, beaten back by the relentless shower. The little clouds, exhausted but exhilarated, kept squeezing, giving every last bit of moisture we had. We watched as our combined effort tamed the roaring monster, turning it into a weak, sputtering ember. We had done it. We had saved the forest. The gentle rain continued to fall, a soft, cleansing song of victory over the smoky, silent land. As the last embers sizzled out under the gentle rain, a hush fell over the forest. The smoke cleared, and a sliver of the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a beautiful, soft light on the damp, saved woods. The air smelled clean and earthy, the scent of wet soil and life renewed. Down below, the animals slowly emerged from their hiding places, looking up at the sky with gratitude. The farmer, from his distant field, took off his hat and smiled a wide, thankful smile. The world felt safe again, washed clean by the courage of the smallest heroes in the sky. The little clouds, tired but filled with an incredible sense of pride, slowly drifted apart. We were back to being small individual puffs, but something had changed forever. We were no longer insignificant specks. We were the clouds who had saved the forest. We looked at each other with newfound respect and friendship, and we all looked at me, their small leader, with awe. I hadn't done it alone, but it was my dream, my courage, that had brought us all together and shown us the strength we never knew we had. I was their hero. I felt a warm glow inside me, a light brighter than any sunset. I was still the same small cloud, a tiny wisp of white in the vastness of the sky, but I no longer felt small. I felt full of purpose and happiness. I had seen my big dream come true, not through power or size, but through hope, determination, and the help of my friends. I looked down at the peaceful forest, at the daisies that were now standing tall and strong, and my heart swelled with a quiet, profound joy. I had made a difference, a very big difference indeed. From that day on, I was never just little Raindrop again. I was Raindrop, the hero of the forest fire, the cloud with the biggest heart in the sky. I continued my work, helping thirsty flowers and filling bird baths. But now I was often joined by my friends. I had learned the most important lesson the sky could teach. It doesn't matter how big or small you are. What matters is the size of your dream and the courage you have to chase it. And in the big, wide, wonderful sky, my gentle glow was a constant, hopeful reminder that even the smallest among us can change the world.